Today, an exclusive true crime. Could this happen to you? We're asking the question, could you marry a dangerous sociopath and not know it? It happened to Terra Newell. She met John Meehan online, and they fell in love. He appeared to be the man of her dreams, a handsome, charming, successful anesthesiologist. But underneath the surface, things were far from what they seemed. And it was all documented in the viral podcast, Dirty John, that has terrified women across America. At 59, Terra Newell had 4 grown children and a successful interior design firm. Divorced and single, she turned to a dating site. That's where she met John Meehan, tall, handsome, and muscular. His profile described him as a Christian divorced physician. On their first date, Terra fell for his dashing looks and his riveting tales of spending the past year in Iraq as an anesthesiologist. By their second or third date, John was telling Terra he loved and wanted to marry her. Terra thought she'd finally found her fairy tale romance.
We would take a walk, he would hold my hand and want to hear all about my day. He came off as the perfect husband.
Smitten, she overlooked his quirky habit of wearing his faded medical scrubs everywhere and inconsistencies about his past, finances, and homes he said he'd owned. Soon, John was spending nights at Terra's penthouse, which was a bit fast for her family, who worried she was falling in love too quickly. John claimed their concern was rooted in jealousy and pushed her to distance herself from them.
He was quite excited and kept saying, I can't wait to be married to you, and just, I'm so in love with you.
John and Terra wed in a secret ceremony just 2 months after their first date. Terra felt she'd married her Prince Charming. She was wrong. Terra's family had hired a private investigator and found John Meehan was not the man he claimed to be. He wasn't an anesthesiologist or any kind of doctor. He was an unemployed grifter who'd been in prison numerous times. He idolized the mafia and had a violent history of abusing women, drugs, and the law. He also had a nickname, Dirty John. But when confronted with his lies and crimes, Terra still stayed with John, convinced she loved him and that he loved her. John tightened his manipulative control, monitoring Terra's every move, further isolating her from her family. By the time Terra realized she'd made a dreadful mistake and left, John was making violent threats against her and her family. They feared he was capable of killing them. They were right. Terra Newell is here in her first ever television interview. I thank you for being here, be willing to relive this. It can't have been easy to decide to tell this story. What compelled you to come forward?
I felt that it was important to get my story out there to help other women. I believe that, number one, dating websites, there is a lot of lies from men, women included, and I happened to meet someone that was the best at his game.
What were the first signs that there was a problem with John Meehan?
Well, everything was too good to be true. He seemed like, what I realized is he was listening to everything I had to say, and he tended to be everything that I wanted. From going to church, to loving kids, to being successful, funny. So he seemed like he had it all and was looking for, someone to fall in love with.
Was there a moment when he did something a little different than what you expected, when you began to suspect there might be an issue here?
Well, he was very pushy. He wanted to get married within the second date.
Second date?
Second date. And he would ask me, I would say 10 to 20 times a day. There were...
So he'd ask you to get married 10 to 20 times a day?
Yes.
No, that's pushy, yes.
That would be on the pushy side, yes. Yeah.
What did you think was going on when he was... I mean, obviously he seems to be in love, but that's, everything for love was a bit...
Well, I don't know if... I'm not sure he was in love. I think that I was his next victim.
Aha.
So.
Good insight. Producer of Dirty John, Karen Lowe, is joining us in the audience. What a fantastic job. I mean, just riveting. And again, to bring your story alive took a team. And it has so much they can share with America. But why do you think it's captured the attention of so many people? Why has it resonated across America?
There are a lot of people looking for love online. And these were people who were telling us about their own personal experiences. We made it an unforgettable experience. So much so that this podcast has been downloaded now 10 million times.
10 million?
10 million times, and it has jumped the pond. We're hearing about people overseas now who are listening to this. And it's sort of created discussion in newsrooms too. At a time now, I mean, when we look at what's happening in the sort of national debate with men and women in media and power, this is part of a spectrum. And in this case, we're talking about domestic abuse sort of taken to a new extreme. There is language for this overseas. It's illegal. It's called coercive control. It's not in our vernacular, but Deborah was certainly a victim of it.
So when we come back, it all came to a dramatic end after John filled his car with drugs and knives and a kidnap kit, complete with tape and zip ties, and stalked Deborah's daughter, Terra, at her apartment complex. What happened next is unbelievably chilling. I'll be right back. Back asking the question, could you be married to a dangerous sociopath and not know it? Deborah Newell found herself trapped in a marriage with the sociopath known as Dirty John. And it all came to a dramatic end that no one saw coming. Deborah's daughter, Terra, joins us now in her first ever television interview. I know it's sensitive and it's probably raw, but let's get into it. Your first impressions of John, Terra, what were they?
He was really standoffish. He didn't want to look you in the eyes. He's just like a closed door.
And you'd ask him typical questions for a man who might become your stepfather.
Yeah, like, oh, do you have any children? What do you do for a living? And so on.
And he wasn't answering those, or?
Well, he answered them, but he'd be like, oh, I'm a doctor. And I'd be like, okay, do you want to elaborate on that? And then he'd be like, I do anesthesiologist. It's boring. I'm like, okay. And then I would ask him questions about his kids. I'm like, okay, how many kids do you have? He's like, I have 2 daughters. And I'm like, do you have any pictures? And then he didn't really want to like show me pictures of them.
Yes.
And
so being aloof.
yeah.
So Deborah, your daughters are warning you that they have a belief that he's not what he says he is.
Yes.
You go off to a therapist.
Yes.
And the therapist tells you to not let your kids control your destiny.
Yes.
Don't let your kids tell you what to do. Is that good advice?
No, obviously.
How did it come to be that was the advice offered?
Well, they were looking at it as these are grown children. They have their lives now. You can move on and have your life. And John went to the therapist. He was actually...
He came with you.
He came with me. And so he was able to voice his opinion, and he literally had them conned also. He was that good.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So here you are watching your mom fall in love with a man that in your gut you think is a problem, that he might actually be dangerous. So what's it like emotionally to watch your mom go off on that precipice?
Well, it was heart-wrenching. Me and John actually got into it because the day before Thanksgiving, I asked her a question. I was like, why is John using your car and stuff? Does he not have his own car? And then I also found a nursing certificate in the closet, but I wasn't looking for anything. I was just looking for a space to hang my clothes when I stayed there. And he got really upset. My mom came up.
It was his nursing certificate?
It was his. And well, my mom came up and asked me, like, why are you acting like this, Terra? Why are you asking all these questions? You should just like let me live my life. And then he came up behind her and started just screaming at me that I wanted to isolate my mom away from him, and I didn't want my mom to be happy. And I want my mom to be happy, but just there's red flags and there's flaws in the stories he was telling. So
Did you sense danger when you had that fight?
I thought, who is this guy telling me what to do? And I think he's trying to take my mom away and isolate her from the family because he already did so with my other sister.
So, Deborah, he's lured you in. He's pressuring you, asking you to marry him 10 to 20 times a day,
Yes.
at least at the beginning. He's isolated you from your family. It's interesting you use that word isolation. At what point did your doubts about Dirty John turn to fear?
There were certain things that were happening along the way. Although he had a great answer for everything, he even had us going to a lawyer, and the lawyer told me that everything was false about John.
The
Anyway,
lawyer told you that.
a lawyer.
So you went to a lawyer, and the lawyer told you all the allegations about John were false.
Yes,
So the therapist, the counselor rather,
yes,
and the lawyer are both saying this guy's legit?
yes.
It's only your daughters are saying there's a problem.
They're seeing the red flags, and I'm letting my heart rule over my head, so I'm not really paying attention to them. I'm ignoring them.
So it all came to a dramatic end that no one saw coming. Everyone's worst fears were realized when John stalked Terra at her apartment complex. Take a look at this. By the time Deborah realized her fairy tale marriage was really a nightmare, her estranged husband, John Meehan, was threatening her family. They feared he was capable of killing them. They were right. After stalking Deborah and her family, he targeted her youngest daughter, Terra, ambushing her in a parking lot with a knife.
I bit him. I was pushing him, trying to get away from him. He started to punch me, I thought, but it turns out he was stabbing me.
Terra fought desperately for her life and was somehow able to turn John's knife against him, stabbing him 13 times.
The last one was in the eye.
Inside his car, police would find his passport, drugs, what police call a kidnap kit, and more knives. John Meehan eventually died from his injuries, leaving Deborah and her family struggling to understand how she could have fallen for and stayed with a sociopath. So John attacked you. You struggle with this knife. Take us back to what happened. How did you manage to survive, much less kill the perpetrator?
Well, I had my dog with me. I was getting off of work. My dog actually warned me, and he barked and growled at him before I even got out of the car, but I just thought it was like a homeless guy. And he grabbed me by the waist, and he looked me in the eyes, and he said, "Do you remember me?" That moment, I know that he was up to no good. He was gonna kill me or something. So I tried to run away from him. He kept on grabbing me and stuff, and he put his hand over my mouth. I tried to bite as hard as I could and scream and try to get away from him. He didn't like that I was trying to get away from him, so he started to, what I thought was punching me, but he was stabbing me.
Oh.
And I ended up on the ground on my back, and he was on his knees, and he was just wailing on me, trying to hurt me. Mm-hmm. And I was just kicking as hard as I could and trying to block the knife so it wouldn't hit me. So I was able to kick the knife out of his hand, and it landed directly right beside me. I'm a right-handed person.
Oh my goodness.
So I picked it up, and I just started wailing on him, and I thought it's either me or him. And my dog was also attacking his ankles at the same time, so I think that might have helped the knife get released from his hands.
Do you remember stabbing him in the eye?
I do. That in the forehead, I remember. I watch a lot of Walking Dead, so I'm like, oh, zombie kill.
Walking Dead?
Yeah.
That may be the first time watching that show saved a life.
Yeah.
You actually thought that? I mean, it's an incredible ordeal. No one should have to go through that. And it is a miracle that he didn't kill you. It's an even bigger miracle that you killed him back. How have you coped emotionally and physically since then?
Well, I've been through lots of therapy, and that's definitely helped. Done EMDR therapy.
Good.
And but at first I was kind of in shock from it. I was supposed to go to the Jason Aldean concert, so in my head I was like, I need to still go to the concert. Like, I was all bloody and stuff, but I was like, oh, I'll just go like this. And in my head, I'm just in shock from it, thinking like, oh, I'm still gonna go to this concert.
You would look like the Walking Dead. You know, that bandage.
Yeah.
Deborah, I can't imagine being a parent and witnessing that.
Oh.
I mean, I'm just going to go ahead and use the word because I'm as a dad. I'd probably feel guilt.
Oh. It's unbelievable what you feel. You feel at this point that you've caused it because you've fallen for a man that is a psychopath. And yeah, it meant a lot for me to get her as much help as possible. And all I wanted to do was just hug her and say I was sorry that this happened.
Well, I'm happy it had a happy ending.
Me too.
But I know that there are sociopaths,
Yeah.
a lot of sociopaths, which I learned doing preparation for the show out there. So studying John Meehan was a textbook case of a sociopath. So up next, could someone in your own life be a dangerous sociopath? Remember, all the signs were missed by people who are supposed to know. So I'm going to give you the warning signs you can't afford to miss. Don't go away.